because of defending his son, a charge that they couldn't bring criminal charges against. They couldn't bring even civil charges against. This guy was raided by the FBI. Biden, when he addressed the nation, one of the very first semi-fascists that he named after the MAGA crowd were the pro-lifers. If you're not in that camp, and I'm not demonizing you if you're not in the camp, eventually there's going to be the thing that they come for all of us for.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. So the new Prime Minister of Italy gave a speech, and she quoted some old dude from England from the 1800s, and she's talking about words that he was writing, some random things. What is she talking about? It's craziness, but it's actually some very fascinating. Of course, we're talking about G.K. Chesterton, one of me and JP's favorite authors, a renowned Catholic writer, and someone who's very relevant to today and to the challenges that we're facing. But before we get into that, I want to say welcome back to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, where we're Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through stories about faith, not just faith films. Now, I've got my brother with me here, JP in the house. Hello, JP.
Hello, hello.
Welcome, welcome. We're glad that you're here. So, before we get started talking about Chesterton and the Prime Minister of Italy, an interesting story broke out today that is extremely alarming and quite surprising. Today, the word was it today, or did we just not hear about it till today?
We heard about it today. I don't think it happened today. I think it happened Friday, if I remember the story correctly.
Okay. Well, what happened is we've been hearing a lot about raids. It's like kind of getting ridiculous at this point. Like, you get a raid, everybody gets a raid. But the FBI raided somebody's home. And, when you think of the FBI raiding a home, what do you think of? Like, they're like raiding some drug lord's home or like some kind of criminal mastermind. But no, this time they just raided a homeschooling dad and homeschooling, I think, ministry leader dad's home. And he has 7 kids, and he's a pro-life activist. And it's for his pro-life activism that he had the literally 20 FBI agents busting down his door and coming in full battle rattle with their guns and armor and everything, like they're here to take down the, Al Capone or something. But it's really scary, and it's terrifying that it's something that happened, because like here is a father of 7 little kids who are all at the house along with his wife. And I think it was around 7 a.m. that it happened. And so they're all either in bed or getting up for the day, and all of a sudden, you can just imagine it. Like, I think it was a whole bunch of vans just converge on their home, and all of a sudden they're getting screaming and yelling agents that are busting down their doors and coming in with guns. Like, it's hard to think of what kind of trauma that would have on you as a child. And then to see your father being carted off, taken away by very kind of stormtrooperish kind of tactics. And it's quite disgraceful. I think it's a disgrace to the justice system and a disgrace to the people in charge. But there's a lot to unpack about it, because of course this is not just some criminal. In fact, he is not even a criminal. Like, the charges that they're arresting him over were all dropped long ago. But I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about it, JP. What are your want to hear what you're thinking about this?
Well, I would start off with saying, let's clarify the facts. This man, it was almost over a year prior to this man was out in front of an abortion clinic, and he was doing sidewalk counseling, which, if people do not know what that term means, what it means is you offer to women as they're walking into the abortion clinic, and you can tell that they have a baby inside them. You offer them alternatives. You don't stop anyone from walking in. That's not what sidewalk counselors do, but you call out to them. And I've never done this myself, but I've seen it happen enough. You call out to them and you say, hey, you don't have to go inside there. There are other options for you. In case you don't know, there are other options. And then if and a lot of the women are excited to hear about the other options. Oftentimes women feel entrapped into having abortions. It's a very common story that you hear in the pro-life industry. And so the fact that someone's out there offering other options is often very appealing. So what Planned Parenthood has done is they've started all over the country, starting to have escorts, which they're done to kind of push away any pro-lifers so that women don't hear about other options. And so this guy was out there doing the good work of offering other options to women. And he was out there with his 12-year-old son, which rings a bell because I would be like 12-year-old son out there, and Peter would be as well. Growing up, we would go with our dad. And the particular escort, and generally the escorts, growing up, there was at least one skirmish I can think of that we had with an escort who was belligerent. I had a camera and I was taking pictures of some other pro-lifers, and they didn't like it. So they got in front of me and they tried to like push my camera away. And that's like the worst that happened. But this particular, according to the accounts of the scene of this thing that happened years ago, this particular Planned Parenthood escort was being verbally abusive to the 12-year-old son, was using words that the Planned Parenthood escort was calling that boy's father, so the man who's in question right now, using a term for calling a homosexual that I don't use. It's the same term that's used to describe something that burns in fire. And that man was worried for his son's safety because this Planned Parenthood escort was getting in front of this man, and was this Planned Parenthood escort was getting in front of this 12-year-old and getting very close to him and screaming at him. And so the man defending his son said, back up, get out of my son's face. And he tried to come in between the two. And this escort, by the physical act of the man trying to come between, according to the accounts of people who are at the scene, fell back. I think he might have fallen on the floor. That wasn't as clear. All I know is it says they fell back. Or this Planned Parenthood escort fell back. And because of that, this escort was trying to sue in civil court. There was no criminal charges made because there was no case to be made criminally for that, but was trying to sue this guy in civil court. And even in civil court, that was thrown out. The Planned Parenthood guy didn't bother to show up. And so now, over a year later, this man his house is raided, and the cover page that's shown on the search warrant is because of that case. It's called freedom of access infringement, is what it put on the cover page. So because of defending his son, a charge that they couldn't bring criminal charges against, they couldn't bring even civil charges against, this guy was raided by the FBI. So the points that I think we should all be taking is eventually there's going to be the thing that they come for all of us for. I mean, Biden, when he addressed the nation, one of the very first semi-fascists that he named after the MAGA crowd were the pro-lifers. And so if you're not in that camp, and I'm not demonizing you if you're not in the camp, but eventually they're going to find something, that camp that you're in, that will put you on the list to get rated. Just by the fact that Peter and I are on the pro-life camp, we're on the list to get rated. Just because they put you, maybe it'll be because you don't like what's being taught at your child's school. Maybe the sex that they're describing to your 6-year-old is a little too graphic for you, and you voice your displeasure. Well, that's another reason. You're probably already on the list if you've done that. So the point that it occurs to me is, historically speaking, there's always the crowd where they're going to find you. Just like in Germany, there was always, first they came, for the Catholics, and then they came for the Jews, and then, there was the list of people that they came after. And if you're not on the list now, eventually you're on that list, and before you know it, you don't have the country anymore. So this sort of thing is a little bit shocking.
And it's really, there's so much to unpack, because there's a lot of layers of unfairness, I think, in this case. And like you were saying, we would go out there as kids as well to the Planned Parenthood and to the abortion clinics. And I have memories myself of being, like, say I was probably around 9 or 10 or something like that. And I would be sidewalk counseling the woman as well. Like, we would have these pamphlets that were filled with just scientific facts about, fetal development, and also just about free resources that were available to give aid to these women. And I remember that the Planned Parenthood escorts were extremely aggressive to me as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old child, that they would, they would be moving, or like trying to, like, just kind of keep you back, like as if you were about to, like, bite someone, like you're a feral animal. And when you're literally, I was just like a 9, 10-year-old kid with the pamphlets, trying to say good morning and hand them something. I remember there was one time when the Planned Parenthood volunteer was like, he was, it was such a strange encounter. I remember being like, what on earth? Because there was a woman that I was like trying to counsel, and he was like, as the pro-life crowd, they're, as you can see, they always train their kids to say and do exactly what they want them to say and do. And then he, like, pointed to me and he was like, as you can see, they also train monkeys. And I was like, and I remember being like, what? That's okay. That was just really strange. Like, so they were definitely very aggressive. Like that kind of that story embodies their general attitude towards even children. Like, as you would, I guess it's not surprising that a company that literally exists to kill children is going to treat children on a street badly as well. So this story is completely, it's understandable, and it's something that you could definitely, from my experiences, can definitely see happening. But then just the way that this administration, and also just the people in charge of the FBI, like, literally, like, it's just so many, it adds to the layers of, like, discordance and, like, complete shock for something like this happening, because this happened years ago, and then it was dismissed, and then but somehow this administration looks at it and be like, this seems like a perfect case to go and make an example of this guy. And that's really what it is when it comes down to, right? They're making an example to all other pro-lifers and to anyone who is more conservatively oriented, that, hey, like, it doesn't matter what you did, or what it is that you're standing up for. We are coming for you, and we're going to raid your home with 20 agents early in the morning in front of your children. And it's just crazy. And I think kind of going off of what we were talking about earlier with Chesterton, Chesterton and the Italian Prime Minister. We'll talk about them in a second. These people, this guy, I think his name is Mark Houck or something like that. He's a pro-life activist. He is being arrested, and his home is being raided, and his children and wife are being traumatized because he took his faith to the public sphere. He took his faith outside the doors of the church to actually affect the world and to do something about his faith. And I think that is what makes him dangerous. He is a danger to the administration. He's a danger to the world. And he warrants being treated like a criminal mastermind and being raided by agents with rifles because he takes his faith seriously. It actually has an effect on his life. And which is something that I really liked about this new prime minister, which we really don't know much about. So maybe she's not all that great. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. But she did give a very moving speech. I don't know. Did you get a chance do you know what I'm talking about, JP?
I listened to the 2-minute clip on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see all of it. Have you listened to all of it?
Yeah, I was looking up a few different things about her today because she's also a pro-life advocate as well. And it's really interesting to see, like, if you just look her up, every media site is calling her a neo-fascist, which is really interesting to see. They're like labeling her as a Catholic far-right neo-fascist. Because she's
fascinating to me. The same people that are calling, the same outlets and the same journalists that are calling her a fascist are the same ones that were praising Biden's blood red drenched speech in front of the in Philadelphia, surrounded by Marines, while he called all of us dangers to the democracy. Which is that's not fascistic at all, right?
No, not at all. But you don't understand. But Mussolini was from Italy, and he was,
Biden's not.
So this lady, she's neo-fascist because she's conservative and she's from Italy. So that means she is Mussolini, because that's how that works. But really, the news headlines, like a common trend that I was seeing through these different things with this, this new neo-fascist prime minister of Italy, she's Catholic, and she takes her faith seriously. So that means she's evil and terrible, and we need to. I was reading something that was saying that she is going to. She's a danger to the Russia-Ukraine war because somehow Italy is gonna change that and she's gonna mess that all up because she's more conservative oriented. But really, like the common trend that I was seeing throughout the headlines today is that people, these media outlets are upset because there are people out there who are taking their faith seriously and they're actually doing something with it. And she quoted one of our favorite authors, G.K. Chesterton, who was also someone who took his Catholic faith seriously. You want to tell them a little bit about Chesterton? I think you're a little bit more fit to say something about him.
Sure. What I would say is he's affectionately called by those that know him the apostle of common sense. He is the great 19th and 20th century English writer who actually made a living off of his writing, which is a difficult thing to do, to just purely be a writer. So he did a lot of journalism. He wrote a lot of books, novels, short stories, you name it. That's how he made his living. And he quite probably was a genius. People that debated with him lived to rue the day that they debated with Chesterton, because he came in with his arguments in line. And well, if you didn't have your arguments in line, you probably weren't going to come out in one piece debate wise. So he wrote so many wonderful books. First that come to mind are the Father Brown short stories, which are mystery short stories people might have heard about. He also wrote great philosophy books where he defended the faith, like in Orthodoxy or The Everlasting Man. Probably my favorite are his short novels. So like the Man Who Is Thursday, The Ball on the Cross, The Napoleon of Notting Hill, which is probably the first on my list for what I want to make movie wise with Chesterton. But again, he was a Catholic who lived his faith through his art, through his means of through his genius. He lived his faith. And another thing that we should mention, he didn't grow up as a Catholic. He was a convert from atheism. And so he wrote about how he came to the faith, how he discovered something that he basically went about trying to invent his own religion, where it should have magic and it should have the old blended with the new, and the traditions of the old somehow discovered anew, renewed afresh for each generation. And so he goes about trying to invent this perfect religion, and he finds out it's already been invented. It's called the Catholic faith. And so he writes about that discovery in great detail in his books. It's something that I think every artist, that every person of faith will find interesting. But that's Chesterton.
Yeah, I mean, I think for really what we're speaking to today, of course, is how the importance of bringing your faith into the public sphere, and that has special meaning, I think, for artists, for people who are in any way involved in the arts or who aspire to the arts, because that creative calling is a special calling. It's a special responsibility, I think, to use that passion for the good of the world and for the glory of God. It's an incredible calling to have. And Chesterton, of course, did that so beautifully and so wonderfully. And you mentioned Ball on the Cross, which is one of his really, great and really enjoyable works. But in that, for anyone who is not very familiar with that work of his, is about two men who are having a duel. They want a duel to the death, because they're both equally they're both equally passionate about one believing that God exists and that he wants to defend God's honor, and he's willing to die for God. And the other one is convinced that God does not exist, and he's willing to fight and to die because this is the most important idea.
One of the last of the honest atheists, Chesterton calls him.
Right. And they keep on getting interrupted everywhere they go because the world doesn't care about. They're the only ones who care enough to actually stop their day, stop everything, be like, no, actually, this is the most important thing. This trip to the grocery store, this trip to the shops and random things. People are just very distracted with the day to day and with the world, and just completely preoccupied with things that are passions that are less important. And so they end up forming this bond with each other because they're realizing, wow, like it's kind of like a little bit of a relationship of respect, because you care enough to actually fight for this. So it's really, I thought it was interesting that the Prime Minister brought up
how exactly did she bring up Chesterton?
Well, she had a quote of his that she had in this speech. And I don't remember the exact quote. We should try to pull that up, but it's to the effect that we people will raise their swords and are having to to raise the standard for the fact that 2 + 2 is 4, and that leaves are green. So it's the idea of actually of fighting and having to fight and to stand up for reality itself. Because in many ways you see that coming more and more under attack. We've talked about this so much in the past about the modern heresy that denies any objective reality or any objective truth. And that has a terrible effect on society and a terrible effect on on the youth of today. Like, you see the soaring suicide rates and the rates of crippling depression throughout our society, because in many ways, I think it's from this denial of reality. And you can't face reality if you don't believe it exists. If you don't believe in any kind of truth, then there is no way to reconcile when truth hits you in the face. And so that's what I think we're called to do as artists and as Catholics. We're called to fight for that truth, to fight for the truth of our faith. But and even more simply than that, right now, it's just fighting for truth at all. Like, that's the basis. You can't argue with someone who. You can't argue for the existence of God if someone doesn't, with someone who doesn't believe in that words have meaning, So, like, you have to have, it's steps, and all of this it's really crazy, but it's an exciting time, because this can be an opportunity to really, like, kind of how Chesterton would put it, to raise your sword for just the idea that 2 + 2 is 4.
The song of the world. That's what he saw as the role of the artist. The artist can capture the fact that a tree is magnificent because it's a tree. We forget the glory of this wonderful creation that's about us. We forget what's beautiful about each baby being born. We forget about the fact that you're not a monkey, Peter, that you are a wonderful person, fearfully and wonderfully made. And the artist brings the glory of the everyday into into present view, into clear view, through his poems, through his novels, through his movies. That is really like the calling. Our past guest Caleb spoke about how the most endearing of all, the truth, beauty, and goodness, that trifecta, the most endearing of them is beauty. And it really is what lasts when things are bad, when death is all around you, like, life can get bad, life can really hurt. One of the few things that convinces people to go on oftentimes is a beautiful memory, a glimpse of some otherworldly joy, which is brought by beauty. So what Chesterton spoke to, and what this prime minister, it sounds like, spoke to, is the fact that we are the anti-death in every way. The enemy in Faust, in the Faust, the novel Faust by Goethe, Mephistopheles, the devil, says that what is his good that he's searching for is the end of all things. And what we see now is the great demonic activity, which demands that no children be born. And, it's under the pretense. It's under the pretense that, well, no unwanted children should be born. But really, at the heart of it, any child that's born is bad. That's what we come down to. You think about C.S. Lewis's great trilogy, the space trilogy that C.S. Lewis wrote, and when he reached the final stage of that trilogy. It's called That Hideous Strength. The evil one also said they wanted all things sterile and lifeless and clean. And that's what we see now. That's what it's going to come down to at the end, because our next big fight is depopulation. We're not going to have the people to man this great civilization. And as it's crumbling down, we're going to be trying to find ways to create life wherever we go. So if we give that image of beauty, like this prime minister did, and like Chesterton did in the art that we do, that is our way of combating the sterility, the nothingness. You remember the old never-ending story movies? The good guys were always fighting the nothing. That's kind of an archetypical idea there. We're fighting sterility and death.
And then, of course, Chesterton brings that the beauty and the magic out, that just jars people, because you become so desensitized to it, right? Just kind of distracted with the world that you end up believing it's lies. That, that tree is, just a block of wood in your way. You have to go around. But then, I love how Chesterton always, like, he has that mad character that just stops and is like just staring at the tree, and everyone's like, what is the matter with you? When he's actually the only sane one, because he stops and sees it for what it is and for its its true meaning.
Well, in The Ball and the Cross, the two characters, the Catholic and the atheist, get locked up in the insane asylum. And that's where he saw us headed, where the inmates are out and they're sending all the sane people to the insane asylum because the sanity is dangerous. And you see that now. The inmates are being out. They're in the classrooms now. They're the people, the men with beach balls inside their shirts that are masquerading as women. You heard about that story probably. It's really, the inmates are in charge in a lot of ways.
Right. But I mean, it's obviously it's a call to, I don't know how you would put it, but it's a call to stand up for truth. And that might that might have your house raided by the FBI, but we hope and pray it doesn't come to that for everyone. But it is true that it's better to stand up for reality, for the truths of God's creation, than to just let yourself, like, to try to to look away, like how, and just preoccupy yourself with other things. Like realizing that this world was made good by God and it's worth fighting for. And I think that's of course what we're all about as the Pinedo Brothers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. With that, we probably are out of time. But did you have any final thoughts before I sign us out?
Well, I guess the last thing I would say is, I think it's easy to speak right now, thanks be to God. This conversation, probably Google will do its best that it won't get out, but probably we won't be put into too much discomfort about it. But it's going to get worse, I think, is what the sign is that it's going to be more uncomfortable to speak about what you believe in, to put your beliefs into the public square. And I think all of us need to prepare for that. Prepare for the moments when it won't be as easy as it is now. Because it seems like that time is coming. But I think it is worth it. I think if you give up everything that you believe in, you give up all the joy and the beauty of this world, the joy of who you are as a person of faith. So it's not worth It's not worth living that way if you're no longer fully alive. Chesterton spoke about a man fully alive. And that's what we are if we live out our beliefs. Otherwise, we're just Winston Smith in 1984, dead. We're still moving, but we're dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the alternative is a little bit too much to bear. So we just need to prepare.
Prayer and act, prayer and trust in God. Yep. And it's a beautiful message. And I think it's a beautiful thing to remember in times of distress when we look at something like this FBI raid on a Catholic father's home just for being a good Catholic father. When you look at things like that, it can be scary, but what you just said, this is a reminder of hope and a call to trust in God. So thank you for sharing that. And of course, thank you for being here again with me this evening. And thank you for joining us. We are the Pinedo Brothers. We are the Catholic filmmakers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art. And we hope that you will join us next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, an artist podcast for Catholics. We hope you enjoyed it, and if so, please consider subscribing, and commenting below. That really helps. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.